Hello, the topic which today we are going to discuss is Founders Agreement.
नमस्कार दोस्तों, मेरा नाम गौरव है। गौरव दली आरबी मेरा यूट्यूब चैनल है। कृपया सब्सक्राइब करें दोस्तों, ये सब्सक्राइब का बटन दबाएं, साथ में बेल आइकन को क्लिक करना ना भूलें।
For startups. Basically, a startup, when going to get started, must have a founders agreement between founder, co-founder, and fellow mates, so that the clear viability of startup role and responsibilities, money or revenue or anything can be diluted or can be diversified, but there must be some clarity and transparency for the same for within the startup for founders, co-founder, and fellow mates. The topic is being covered by CS Gaurav Kumar Sharma, that is me. My mobile number is 9990694230. My email ID is being also mentioned over here. That's gauravdeliarabi@gmail.com. www.csgauravsharma.com is my website. You can get in touch with me over the same. So now let's start with the topic: what is founders agreement and why it is important for your business or a startup. So what is founder agreement? First of all, a founder agreement defines the various roles and responsibilities of the founders or the members of a company. The equity vested in them, mainly equity is the part of some of the capital which is being pooled in by the fellow mates or fellow partners or co-founders or founders. The ownership of intellectual property rights created by them, and their roles and responsibility related to them also. It is a broad agreement covering various aspects of the effort that the founders are about to undertake, including the consequences of their departure or death. This main founders agreement is very important because this is the backbone of the industry or the startup which going to get started with. Without this founders agreement, either the co-founder is going to have a loss or the founder is going to have the profits, or maybe in the future if you are going for the funding, then investors gonna have the say. So do complete the founders agreement first without starting up. So what are the essentials of a founders agreement these days? Many people can make a founders agreement for you in an instant, in a very easy way. So what is the essential agreements points of a founder agreement which I am going to discuss is on a point wise point method. Now I'm going to discuss the same, why it is important and what points are on what grounds are important for you. So we are going to start with equity ownership rights. Equity ownership rights are very important ownership rights when a startup is going to get started with. The founders and co-founders must pool their equity because the early stages of the startup is being carried out by the founders and co-founder. So the funds, the capital or the resources which they are going to invest in a company in an equity basis must be clarified, that what amount of funds being given by Mr. A, what fund amount is being invested in a company through equity mode by Mr. B, Mr. C, or etc. And what are their exit levels and how and when they are going to take these equity after Series A funding, B funding, or something else. So this is a very tricky agreement. If you do not make it clearly, or if you miss out any point or something, then you are going to miss out the essence of a startup ownership, right? So do make it clearly, thoroughly, or with the help of professionals like us, we can guide you for the same. Although there are many professionals in the market who can make these agreement very cheap manner, but they do not think the quality and the essence of these agreements rely or depend upon the professionalism of the people who are handling the day-to-day startup regime which we are going to have. Okay, so now let's move on to the second point, that is clear demarcation of roles and responsibilities. When a startup is going to get started, there are many people who have different roles and responsibility. But if a startup, suppose I'm giving you an example, with the help of an example I'm going to discuss the same. Suppose there are three people: Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. Z is the founders and co-founders of a startup, and there must not be a clear demarcation of roles and responsibilities responsibilities over the same in a startup, then there might be chances that Mr. A and Mr. B is putting lot of efforts to raise the startup to the next scale up heights, but Mr. Z is not putting anything, but wish to get the lucrative revenues when it is going to get successful. So he's only acting as a sleeping retarded problematic founder. So there must be a clear demarcation of the roles and responsibilities, so the efforts of the hardworking founders or co-founder must not go in vain. So this is the important clause which is going to be indispensable for the founder agreement. So now we move on to the third point, that is restriction on transfer of shares. And if we talk about the same, the all the startups these days are studying the case law and case study of Snapdeal, where the SoftBank, the investor, without much of a say of the founders, have sold a stake of Snapdeal in a debacle to Flipkart, and Flipkart going to get sign a term sheet for the same. Other investor, Nexus Partners, trying to sort out the ways, but there must be a clear point of notation or citation in the agreement itself, or founders agreement for a startup, that there must be a clear restriction on transfer of shares on the time period when the shares must be transferred from founders to the investors, or when the dilution in equity can be happen, or what are the ways or the methods, or what are the basis or the foundation stones, or the lock-in period where till what time the founders cannot transfer the shares, or the investors cannot take the shares from the founders. So this must also be carried on with a lot of we can say attention, or a regime follow up. So this is a very important point. If this point do not be taken into account, then the whole essence of agreement, of founders agreement, gonna go into the vain, or may vanish clearly. Fourth point which I am going to discuss is IPR regime, that is intellectual property rights regime. The mechanism of intellectual property rights must be defined and must be on the name of the company or the business or the startup which is going to get started with. Because I'm saying this because most of the time the company going to get started or startup going to get started with do not have the IPR system mechanism clearly defined, and few people have few IPR mechanism system of that startup, and in an individual name, and a company do not hold the ownership of the IPR system mechanism. So there must be a point where clashes or conflicts may arise, or may vanish the whole purpose of the startup. So IPR must be on the name of company or the startup which is going to get started with, apart from individuals or founders or co-founders. This is very important segment and must not be diluted without any focus. So must be focused upon this point, and must be given a good time on drafting and other points as well through a thorough professional. Do not go for cheap things, and do not advise, or I do not suggest that you carry on a similar thing. So do take in account that IPR is a very important mechanism for the company or the startup. Now, if we move on to fifth point, that is value addition by founders, there must be some value addition by the founders, and this must be noted down. If somebody gives some X amount of efforts, and somebody gives the XY amount of efforts, then XY amount of efforts must be appraised through the gifts or other things. But these gifts or other things, or revenues or remuneration additions, or the value additions by the founders, must be appraised in what manners, by shares or by revenue, or gifts or items must be given a point. The sixth point is non-compete agreement clause, which must be given into the picture. Basically, non-compete thing is must these days, because most of the startups who have six or five partners or founders either left with no choice when somebody goes out and start the competition with your own startup, with all the inventions which you have carried on as five people and six one gone out of the startup and started their own startup and competing with you. So this must be adhered with all the founders and co-founders and must be complied with the a due regard. Most of the people do not know that the non-compete clause, if not being taken into account in a drafted way, in a well-drafted way, is nullified agreement. So this do not create any value or anything. So this is only on papers of non-compete. So this must be acted upon thoroughly and must be focused with a very well renowned facts and figures, so that the founders and co-founders cannot compete with the own startup and must not go away with the easy process of the basic essence of the startup. So seventh point which I'm going to discuss is employment benefits involved. At least this seventh point is explanation in itself. Employment benefits involved therein in a startup must be given a thorough picture and must be structured well in an agreement, a founders agreement, so that the attrition rate must be reduced further and benefits must go away from owners to the lower segment of the startup, so that industry segment of that startup must flourish, or that startup must turn on with a great turnover heights and other things. So this is an explanation in itself. So we move on to the next point with the summarized way. Fundraising. Basically, fundraising is an important task and must be adhered with a lot of precautions, because uh, with the same example I'm going to explain the whole picture of fundraising. When Snapdeal needed the funds in around 2008 or 2009, they have been approached by two people. One is Jack Ma, another is SoftBank of Japan. SoftBank tried to put around 150 million or something like that into the Snapdeal, but Jack Ma is going to invest only a few bucks or few $1 million. So Snapdeal co-founders and founders think that a lucrative deal in the investment is only through fundraising through SoftBank, but SoftBank tried to get the most of the out of the equity of founders and co-founders, so they have the controlling stake over there. Although there is another investor known as Nexus Partner over there, but there's a clear demarcation that SoftBank put the whole money and taken the rights out of the voting rights from the founders and co-founders. So industry or the startup over there got so worse or weakened up that the fundraising taken its whole soul of the business. So do remember this point of mine, that fundraising must be equally negotiated and must be negotiated on tranches. So only when the fund must come, when you need the funds importance, or you need the funds in a very emergent way or urgent way. So this is another point which needs to be taken care with. So this must be also adhered in the founders agreement. Ninth point is deadlock way out. So there must be certain chances or consequences or times when founders and co-founders get into a point of discussion, heated up discussions, or the heated up arguments between them, when there is a complete deadlock. And in that case of deadlock, if something is being written right now in the startup beginning way through founders agreement, then that must be resolved over there in a redressal way with the help of this 9 point. So if suppose a person says at the end of a deadlock after 5 years of startup started up, that I want to take 70% or 20% of my capital which I have invested over that time, and now the value of that capital is now 15 or 20 times harder than now. So that person can claim anything. So deadlock way out must be written over there and explained clearly and thoroughly and transparently, without any delusion, without any hindrance, so that a deadlock can be easily pulled out, and a person or a founder or co-founder can easily operate the business without any deadlock. So there must not be any problem over there. So 9 point must be adhered with the help of a professional. 10th point is exit of founders. Obviously, recently Ola also after Snapdeal's debacle change its exit founder ways and exit founder claims or exit founder investment clauses without much of an adherence or much of a hindrance through SoftBank. Also, SoftBank is also invested in Ola, but the way Ola observed the uh, controlling or the coercion powers of deal over there. So now they clearly Ola's Bhavish Agarwal tried to make the exit founders rules so strict for investor like SoftBank so that it must not affect the business way or it must not have the controlling over there. So these must be the essential points. If do not given the great amount of focus, then it can surely harm your business or a startup. For any kind of a query or a contact thing, you can get in touch with me. This is my mobile number 9990694230 and Gaurav Delhi RAV @ gmail.com. www.csgauravsharma.com is my website, and I'll be more happy to tell about you for the startup queries of founders agreement. And this is very essential agreement